Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for the last live stream. Not last, not because it's the least, but last because it's one of the best. So we're gonna get started with this. First of all, let me say one more time. You might be sick and tired of this if you've been following throughout the day. But Swarm's AI Career Triathlon is a full day of programming focused on helping you manage and improve upon your career and awareness around some of the emerging trends and developments with AI technologies. My name is Joaquin Melara. I'm the founder of the Swarm community, and with us today is Kamal Viola. And today we're going to be discussing uh, building and evolving AI platform products. And yeah, that sets the backdrop, sets the scene. I'm going to hand the mic over to Kamal to give a little bit of a self introduction as to who he is, what he's done, and any past historical accomplishments.
Perfect. Thanks, Joaquin. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. When I think about product management and more like my career and how that kind of relates to platform, I think a lot of it is how you want to impact the system that you're essentially working with. So, to give a little bit of context, I've been in product management for about 10 years now, a good chunk of that on the platform side. And I'll go into a little bit about how platform compares to maybe other types of product management. But to start off, a lot of my work on the platform side was working for Paramount, which is a big streaming company. So part of that is how do you think of a platform more holistically versus interacting with different brands? So there's a bit of like me looking horizontally across how products should be done well. After working at Paramount for about 5 years, I transitioned to working with NBC, where I got into the AI solution space, where you kind of think about how do you prototype with AI, how do you think about products evolving in an agentic AI world? And right now, I focus on machine learning platforms, servicing like publishing, editorial, and more like media content. And that's more how do we get the machine learning model deployment system in a great place that every other part of the business, every other brand or like topic area is basically leveraging what the platform has to offer them all.
Excellent. That was a mouthful. And I think that sets the backdrop for the conversation. We have some cards on the table that we can pick up and evaluate now. Just out of my own, for my own sanity, let's do a quick check on what is the definition of a platform and how does that differ from other traditional product management roles.
Sure. So when I think of a platform versus other product management roles, I think it's more you working in depth or vertically versus you working horizontally. When you think about like the vertical aspect of it, you're thinking of like people who work with like monetization and growth. What promotions can I offer to kind of incentivize people to, be more engaged in that experience? If you think about like different brands, you might have a particular like live event that you want to support. How am I in the streaming space? I'll use an example. How am I promoting this live event, this concert, this award show? If you think about Paramount in particular, certain brands like the kids experience, like Nick Jr. in that space, you're going to be very going in depth on like kids content and the family experience. On the other side of that, platform is more the ecosystem that everyone else is relying on. So, for example, I'll use Paramount as an example. At the time that I worked there, every single brand had its own presence on like mobile and TV, which means Nickelodeon has its own app, Paramount Plus has its own app, BET has its own app, etc. Um, every brand's gonna have their own different focus. Obviously, BETs maybe or may not care about the same features that a kid's experience wants, but my job as a platform product manager is how is this ecosystem or platform in the healthiest form possible so all the people who do deep dive into certain other areas of product can all leverage that. That means if you're trying to implement a feature or some new technology, is this something that just one area needs or does everyone benefit from it? So we need to think holistically. This is something that we want to implement or adopt across the board. So that way I can empower other product folks to do what they do best in other areas. So the platform is more the caring about the entire environment and that system as opposed to one particular like branch or initiative.
What are some of the features that make up the distinctiveness of a platform?
Sure. So if you think about it in like the streaming world again, content management. So where when I worked in like the growth monetization aspect, it's more how do we get more subscribers? How do we reduce churn and keep people working with our app and finding that value? Whereas on the platform side, I'm thinking, Apple or Google has this new technology. Is it relevant to the streaming world and to our organization? Is it relevant to everyone? What new technology out there is going to benefit like the group as a whole that we need to adopt? That could mean, migrating to a new tech stack, migrating to a new system. If Apple, for example, has like Vision OS, which was very popular, how do we think about streaming apps in a virtual reality, mixed reality space? Something that everyone's going to need. A lot of those kind of things. If there's something like we had a lot of like music and award shows and things like that, if that's something everyone's going to be working on, you're kind of touching a lot of different places and want to make sure every feature you have is in its best position possible, is consistent across all the different areas where that exists in the right way. So the Nickelodeon app on mobile versus, Apple TV versus Google TV all needs to have the same level of quality, even though they're all different platforms.
Excellent. What are some of the motivators or drivers that inform the decisions that you take as a platform product manager?
I think when it comes to platform, you have to be thinking in a more systems thinking like atmosphere. So if I work just for the kids app, I really only care about the kids and family experience. How do I engender trust? How am I not over advertising to this particular identity group? But when I'm thinking about a platform, it's not about, we have this one event and we need to kind of prepare for that. And then after that, we move on to the next thing. It's more, this entire ecosystem needs to kind of be planned in the right way. So, what patterns do you find across the different brands, across the different interest areas you have? What is something that needs to be a very well quality standard across everywhere? Or, for example, if let's say you have like a content management system, like I have articles, I have shows, I have, movies, are we working with that and serving that in the best way? That content management system essentially is a platform because all the brands are referencing it, all the editorial and journalism folks are using it. It's not, agnostic to one particular area. So if you're going to be doing stuff that's going to be leveraged by a lot of different parts of the business, you have to be very thoughtful about how that system works, how you continuously improve it, how you maintain the quality across all these areas at the same time.
I gotta sit on that for a minute. I mean, it's interesting and kind of obvious, but it's obvious in a way that it's hidden in plain sight that you have to conform to the native experience or the actual fulfillment of some sort of goal that the people you're serving have, right? Like you have to meet them where they're at and provide greater value in a more accessible fashion. Um, so, one thing we were talking about before we started recording is a difference between serving internal users versus external users. So, can you please clarify some of those differences and where you sit in between those two paths?
Sure. So at the time that I was focused on external users, it was more, how is this user experience in a great place that like adults or kids or whoever wants to interact with it? You're thinking about what the direct person, are you reducing the friction to make your app as easy to use as possible? Is it visually appealing or very intuitive so that way people can kind of understand how to navigate it without too much instruction? A lot of that is for any general user, how are you making sure that this experience is easy for them to work with and kind of partner with? When you think about the platform, it's a little bit more internal users in terms of it's people within your company, within that part of the business, who are going to have maybe potentially more specific needs than your everyday user. So if you think about it, if I make a streaming app for you to use versus like your family and things like that, I'm thinking, does this look intuitive that any age group, any demographic is going to be able to work with this? If I'm thinking about what goes under the hood of that, it's more making sure, is the video player performing well on all of these platforms? Because regardless of whether you have an iPhone or you have a Roku, you need to be able to see that content consistently no matter where you're going to. If you're talking about the content, are you pulling the content in a way that it's going to consistently behave to the right quality? If you're thinking about like latency? Is there a lag in terms of, a user clicking on something versus when it gets rendered, because everyone's trying to access that content at one time. So when you're on the external user part, it feels a little bit more one to one. Like, I'm worried about like what you see on the screen and how well it works. If I'm thinking on the platform level, it's more what you don't see. um, like, if you use like a banking app, for example, if you want to transfer money, visually I want you to see that the money got transferred. Under the hood, I want to make sure that actually went from your checking to your savings, not to someone else's bank account. So that's kind of where like the platform stuff, it's like very particular logic to make sure everything under the hood that you don't see is working the way that it should.
And how does that differ from internal users when you're building something that other people rely upon to build that external experience?
I think when you think externally, you're thinking, how do I generalize this for the largest amount of audience possible? When I'm thinking internally for a platform, let's say, for example, I'm working on like the New York Times, for example. The editors and the journalists that are using this have a lot more specific needs that a general audience person may not necessarily articulate. If I'm a journalist, I need to record something, make sure it ends up on the website, make sure that the content is in our system and then visible to folks, make sure it gets like deployed, or like, the marketing, the notifications, all that kind of stuff needs to happen. So someone in that space is going to have very specific criteria of how I want this stuff to show up, how I want our machine learning or ranking or content discovery to work, to make sure that it hits the right folks, that it's personalized the right way. Those are the kind of more in-depth logic details that a platform person might work on, that someone focused on like an end user might not. Your end user is not going to have so many particulars on, like, they just want relevant content, they want something that they're going to care about. But the folks in your company are going to have a lot more specific rules about how do we define the logic that makes sure the end user is happy.
There's a natural extension to this question from Eric Valencia, and he's asking, what AI integrations are you seeing being implemented for external users of your platform in the near future?
I think, well, I mean, AI is the ever present buzzword in the past couple of years. That's not going away. I think when it comes to that, it's everyone is able to move at a much faster scale than they used to. So when you think about, using machine learning to make sure that your search, your recommendation to users, the content discovery is even more relevant than it used to, um, that's a bigger problem. So it's one thing to kind of say, these are the top 10 shows that are trending. It's another thing to kind of say, these are the shows that I'm recommending for you. And that is going to be a lot more effective, where like, Joaquin in particular really really loves these shows. That, are you going to click on them, are you going to watch them, are you going to come back to them, versus the person sitting next to you on the couch and their profile, and that being potentially a completely different amount of recommendations. But how accurate are you making sure that what you're putting out there is exactly what that user needs and wants to engage with? So when it comes to AI, part of it is, how productive are you being, meaning personal productivity, productivity within the other employees in your org, how accurate you are at serving the user what they're looking for. Um, so AI, I think, is going to be hitting like a lot of those places, and with everyone else also being empowered with AI, it kind of really makes sure that like you have to put in the work to make sure that like what I'm serving you is something you really want, and that I'm really, hitting that mark for you.
Excellent. We do have a question coming in, which is previewing some other topics that we had lined up, but we must serve the crowd. Abdelila Nouri asks, "What is the biggest mistake early stage teams make when integrating AI into a product?"
So I think there's the school of thought where people kind of just like throw AI at the problem. And because, AI is out there, everyone's in a race to use it. If you don't, another company will and beat you there faster. But I think the problem that people make is you're not framing the problem well. I've been in institutions where, we want to just see what's possible and work with AI. And that's cool for like an experimentation standpoint. But at the essential end of the day, AI is not the end all be all. It's not, it's just a tool. It's, a hammer or a wrench. You may or may not need it. If you're not framing the problem of why you want to use AI, you're not going to use it as effectively as you could be. So I think the biggest mistake people make is, what is the problem that you're trying to address? Being very specific about, what value you're trying to add, why you think AI can do that, and making sure that you're very targeted, that this is just yet another tool that's going to help me achieve this thing. If you don't define what you're trying to achieve well, you can waste time, spend this time inventing something. And then when you try to bring it to the market, bring it to actual folks, that part becomes a lot more convoluted, delayed, things like that, because you didn't really like think it through before jumping straight to the tech itself.
For the sake of arguments, and for having a more complete definition, can we pull apart this definition of AI because it represents many various different things? So, what are some examples of AI specific technologies that you're using now and looking to integrate into the stack?
Sure. So I would say there's maybe like, in my experience, like three buckets that I've essentially worked with. One is AI productivity. So that's, how are other people in my organization better able to use AI to automate, solve problems, or essentially like do new things that they haven't done before. So that could be, maybe your company wants to do like an agent that helps to answer like HR or finance or like travel questions. So that way I can automate this manual thing where all these folks have had to do that. We've all seen a lot of AI in like customer service kind of situations where like, how can I automate most of the issues people have? So that way, when an actual human needs to get involved, it's because they do, not because they're answering a generic question a million times a day. Um, Another part of that is, how are you taking an existing product that you have and enhancing it with AI? So that's where you kind of get to, I have this streaming app. I manually curate these carousels of shows that I want you to watch. But now I can use AI and machine learning to kind of say, based on the data I have about you, I have a lot more accurate picture of what's going to work for you that you're going to like. So I'm going to use AI to enhance something existing to make sure that it's more relevant to you, more interesting, you're more engaged. I think the third bucket of AI, which is like the newer space for me, is how do we under the hood manage the machine learning, the LMM, the models that we deploy in a way that like our organization runs more efficiently, that different parts of the business can run their own machine learning models so that way they can further their own initiatives. So it's not just this platform team is the bottleneck to you deploying a model to either understand data or give better recommendations or search. How are you empowering others to be a little bit more ingrained in how they can use AI beyond that surface level, productivity of like, here, I put in some data, write me an email or write me a document.
I think this is an excellent transition to talk about more of a media specific explanation of how to scale or support an ecosystem effectively with the work that you do. It hadn't come to me before we had these discussions, the similarities of media specific use cases to the library function, information science, how you have a catalog of resources, whether you're in a physical library or you're trying to go on Amazon or you're trying to go on into Blockbuster or Netflix, and you want to access a particular resource that has a genre or a category label, and you want to look at things that are like that. I mean, if you like horror comedy, you're gonna like things that have those similar characteristics. So I'd love to hear from your perspective some of those characteristics and maybe layers of complexity that you deal with on a regular basis.
Sure. So I'll use streaming again as an example, but let's say like you've opened up the app, there's a bunch of different shows there, and then there's this like decision paralysis. It's like you see the full menu, you've opened up all the pages. Now I don't know what I want to pick. That's a very simple question to like assume for a user. I don't know what to watch. If you're thinking about on the business side, there's a lot more things that go into, I want you to find the right thing to watch, and we potentially have these other goals as well. So a company might say, I want to promote this new show that's happening, or people are particularly just watching this one thing, but I want to expose them to the rest of our content, like what else we have out there. And also, if you think about like the metrics that go behind some products, they're thinking about how engaged are you, how much time are you spending on our app, are you like looking through some shows, not finding something and then closing it because we're not really doing anything for you. um, and how much time you're willing to kind of engage in something. That goes into, am I collecting the right data about my user? Am I recommending the right things for them? Am I giving them a mix of one content that I know that they like, or things that tangentially, they don't know that they like yet, but I'm helping them discover? Those are a lot more different ways to answer that same question of I don't know what to watch. So, in one example, my team and I kind of thought about like, well, what's an interesting way that we used to think about like finding the right thing to watch before this whole like streaming situation came up. A random idea that we had was like that movie theater experience. Like you go, you sit down, because I bought a ticket to this movie. I'm now serving you other trailers that I think are like in the wheelhouse of what you might be interested in. So we kind of thought about like, how do you use AI to have that problem, or to solve it rather? So you can think about, you have an account, you have data. I've seen what you watched and didn't watch. I know what's like trending in the world or your country or region about what people liked and didn't like. Um, and then I also have this massive library of content that, you might like a show that's like playing right now. You also might like this movie from like 20, 30 years ago that fits a similar theme. Um, I think with AI and machine learning, we've passed the point where it's like, I want to look at the horror genre, where you can kind of say, I want something that's like horror or scary, but age appropriate because I have a 14-year-old child or a 6-year-old and I'm introducing them to scary stuff. Um, so when you think about that, you're moving beyond just a prearranged list of interests that people have versus I want to use like natural language where you type in that and I'll give you the TV show, the movie, the song, to kind of curate it to you. So we're using AI to kind of understand the context that people need a lot more than usual. So instead of you just clicking on horror and just hoping that you find something, you know, can I serve that up to you and kind of say, okay, I know this much about you. I'm going to serve you some clips and some trailers of both new and old things that I feel like are going to target you based on everything that I know, and make it a lot more friction free for you to kind of say like, oh yeah, I like that, I'm gonna add it to my list, I'm gonna give it a try. So a simple I don't know what to watch has a lot of different ways to answer, and finding the best way that works for you versus me versus millions of others is where AI can help answer that in a way that are more generic ways of answering that were probably like less accurate overall.
That was such a articulate and comprehensive answer. Kudos. Yeah, I was gonna jump in on that. Earlier today, we had Garima Gujral, that she is an ontologist for Amazon. She was talking about some of the manual workflows that she has. So she helps to develop the categories for faceted search. When you go on Amazon, you look at categories of things. She helps to define the aboutness of different things. So she gave the example of a coffee mug, and she said, here's the capacity, here's the size, here's the graphic, here's the seasonality. Is it for Mother's Day? Is it for Valentine's Day? All the different aboutness, all the different details and metadata that's important. Um, so that leads me to ask you. I kind of got wound up in my own explanation. Oh yeah, so her workflow is a needs assessment. So what does the business want to accomplish, or what kind of obstacles are we trying to solve? She does a gap analysis of how far away they are from being able to solve that. They generate a couple possibilities and execute on one or whatever is feasible within a certain sprint, and then based on that they reflect and they figure out how to improve that or go in a different direction. So what you were describing kind of draws a parallel to that. Where do you begin with prototyping? That's something we wanted to cover in our discussion as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think before AI, it was very much like I'm going to write this product requirements document, I'm going to get all the details lined up, and then we're going to start to iterate on like what works, and try to build this prototype, and then like that's like our baby that you're kind of carrying forward. I think prototyping now allows you to try multiple avenues, like you can travel multiple avenues in the maze and then easily check off the paths that don't work, and then your strategy essentially is refining and honing down to the one that does. So if you think about like so one example that I had is with marketing. When you market to folks, you're thinking demographics, location, language, what kind of offers are there for each person. That can be very manual for a marketing team to kind of say, how do you hit that point? Rather than me kind of go through like I'm gonna do all this documentation and have all these weeks and weeks of meetings and then arrive at a solution. Given the speed that technology works, you could be late to the party by taking all of that time to get to that one point where you have something to offer. Whereas now I can kind of do three, four different prototypes, kind of have like a natural dialogue that you and I are having with like a GitHub Copilot or a Microsoft Copilot or whatever, arrive at multiple different prototypes. And instead of me just using my words to articulate to design and engineering, this is what I think we should do, I can come with a clickable prototype that kind of says, I've tried this three, four different ways. Here's the idea, and here's a visual representation of kind of like potential ways we can do it. Now it's a lot easier to have that dialogue with, experts in user experience, experts in engineering about what does it take to get this little idea off the ground into production. What's right or wrong about the design that's going to actually really hit home with users. So for the marketing example, I was able to build a prototype that I can kind of say, I want to promote XYZ promotion to users in the Northeast, and then the prototype can one translate to multiple different languages, use past examples of like marketing, whether it's social media, email blasts, banner advertisements on random websites, generate multiple different versions of that. So that way users can kind of just like the marketing team can just pick their favorites, maybe just do some minor edits. But if we've done all this work to do it before, why not learn from that and then instantly leverage that to kind of like get you off the ground? So instead of starting at step one each time, we're starting on step three. If I want to switch to Spanish speaking users because I'm targeting the US, I shouldn't have to go through all the hoops to kind of make sure like, is this translated correctly? Let me start from scratch. It helps everyone with an easier starting point so they can move a lot further, a lot faster. So that's kind of like one of the prototypes that I kind of help bring to life is, we have all this backlog of stuff. Why aren't we using it in a smart way to not reinvent the wheel each time?
Those sound very useful. Generative AI used to generate possibilities. Go figure. Um, but it is incredibly useful that you can compress the development timeline of, is this feature useful? Let's try it out. If we're missing something, what do we need to add, and what is the ROI of continuing to invest in this kind of thing? Speaking of ROI, you've also written an article through one of our media channels, AI Infused, and you've discussed the fixation on models rather than problems. Can you talk a little bit about some of those pitfalls and where you would advise somebody to go if they're looking to develop AI native prototypes?
Sure. I think when I first got more involved with AI in my professional life, I think the bigger buzz was OpenAI put out a new model that can now do this, or Claude can now, work with Excel or generate the formulas or like make the PowerPoint deck. And I think knowing what the latest model can do that the past model couldn't do is valuable because obviously you want to know what the tool can do for you. But I think some people get fixated on, you know, Claude now has Claude Code. We need to experiment with Claude Code just because it's new and it's shiny and it just came out. Versus, do I actually have a use case or something going on that I need to use this thing? So knowing what's hip and new with AI is like, it's valuable, but you have to put it in relation and in context to what you're trying to accomplish. So I've definitely been in scenarios where, a new technology comes out. We should just experiment with it just to see what's possible. Yes, that's fine. And yes, that could be good, especially for like a personal project. But essentially, I'm also still working on something for potentially weeks at a time that doesn't address a problem we're trying to solve, or we're really just doing it just to do it and then it doesn't go anywhere. So, was that time better spent on a real problem that we had and making it applicable and kind of furthering a goal? I think that's like the frustration I started to run into. So, I think knowing what's new is great. Having a more systems thinking lens where you kind of think about how does this affect the next domino? So if we do this and we invest in this, what's the next thing that's going to happen? How feasible is it to one, solve this problem, two, work for our users, three, even be possible to like get it from demo to production? Because I can make something flashy for you in a few minutes. Are we really going to be able to put it out there? How long is that going to take? Is our infrastructure and our system and platform set up to even really make this happen in a way to kind of touch the everyday users. If you haven't thought through that part of it, you can really make something impressive, but then it's not going to go anywhere, or it'll take so much longer than you think to really actualize that you end up being behind the ball and someone else has already done it sooner. And then the idea kind of falls flat. Or you build something great and then you kind of have to throw it in the trash because it's not as feasible as you thought it was.
It's interesting the trends of how execution of concepts has gotten so much uh, cheaper that we kind of get fixated on these ideas and just taste them down because now they're tactile. Now you can touch them, and you get married to this idea prematurely before you have a chance to apply some level of critical thinking and some filters, some criteria constraints that would eliminate it just on the basis of it not being feasible on subsequent investments or timelines, or yeah, we can spin something up, but to integrate this and make it enterprise grade would require x amount of resources more than what we're willing to commit to. Um, so that can lead us into the last topic, which is ROI. How do you use judgment to ensure that the prototypes that you are investing time, energy, people, other resources into are accurately and sagaciously spent?
Right. I think there's like a on a company organization level and on a personal individual level, there's like a sense of fear that comes with the awe of AI. So it's impressive, but I think each company's kind of worried if we don't get into AI fast enough, our competitors will. If we don't figure out the next big model or AI thing, someone else in like this country, another country will. And even personally, people are worried like, how's this going to impact my job or, life as I know it right now. I think when you think about ROI, at the end of the day, AI is supposed to be a tool to make human lives better. So regardless of whether you're working with AI or not, what is the human problem or need that you're trying to address? Um, whether AI exists or not, you still have hunger, you still have pain, you might still have like something like that. Identifying that first, and then how is this a tool that helps that happen? um, I think that that's the part of it. Like you can carry something by hand, you can build a cart and push it and carry a lot more. So that kind of like thinking or attitude needs to be approached with this technology. Just because it's new doesn't mean you don't think about how you apply it, in the way that like makes the most sense. And if you're not answering that question and framing the problem, you can build something great, but it doesn't mean that people out there in the wild really care or will use it or it actually really hits what they need. You can't make it just your idea. It's about what is the collective benefit that this is going to have to people. With tech, it can be a little bit harder because obviously I'm not always making a physical product that you're going to have in your home. Like I'm not building you a mattress or a bed or a table. But at the same time, you need to feel like this thing that I'm building is beneficial to you in a kind of similar way. So framing that problem, I think, is still like a consistent thing we need to do, regardless of like the means of answering that evolving.
I'm gonna completely go off the rails now. Don't get scared, but Uh,
Here
I
we go.
really admire you for your tenacity and ability to become adaptive. I mean, you've undergone a few career shifts throughout the span of your, professional development. So, could you talk just a little bit about some of those changes and the mental attitude that you've had that has allowed you to make these pivots strategically?
Sure. Um, so it's funny. I feel like it's something that I've been doing a lot longer than I appreciated. So to give you like a very quick summary, I went to college. I thought I was going to be pre-med and like become a doctor and all this other good stuff. And then through going through the courses, I'm like, okay, this isn't really the thing for me. I knew that technology was. But at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm close to graduating. I'm not going to start all over with a bachelor's. So I kind of thought, okay, I'm not married to any one avenue. Being able to pivot and change your perspective and kind of stay gritty is very important. So I kind of thought, all right, well, I didn't do the computer science degree, but I'll let my work experience pivot me into the avenue that I want to get into. So that led me from like working in HR. I worked in HR technology and info systems. I built that experience on the job with moving into technology because I knew just going back for the traditional route was time and labor and money expensive. Um, and I think one thing to do is one, f- treat it like you're sharpening the knife. I'm trying to take away what doesn't work for me to be a lot more focused and strategic in the thing that I really care about or really intellectually engages me. So that went from HR technology to doing a boot camp for software development, which is how we initially met, to working in software engineering and then realizing, okay, knowing the data and building the software is great, but I really love the strategy behind how to pick apart a problem and solve it the right way and see all the avenues to where that can be answered. That's what led me to product management. So it's more letting your interests guide you, not letting you feel like there's only one particular path to get to the end state that you want to get to. And there's a way to work within your means or current situation to navigate to the way that you want to. So as long as I'm not forced to that one perspective and being more flexible, open minded, um, it might be roundabout, it might not be a straight line, but there's a way for you to repivot to like what makes the most sense for you.
There's two quotable T-shirts in what you said, for me at least. Stay gritty and treat it like sharpening the knife. I thought those were quotable pieces of advice. Very, very cool. Come out. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to engage us, engage the audience, and participate in this programming. And thank you, everybody that's tuned into the whole triathlon. Uh, I hope you got value out of this. And if you want to reach out to Kamal for further conversations, advice, whatever, he's a super cool dude. Um, but if you do ask him for advice, treat him to a game of pool. That's my only advice.
You're saying I need to practice.
I'm saying you like it. All right. Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.